Nick Diaz, Kirk Cameron, Juvenile, and 10 million views, or you get your money back. The scroll is real, or should I say the scroll is reels, especially in my life. I sat down this morning and I was trying to spend some time with the Lord. And as I was doing that, my phone was out, and I bet you I'm the only one that does this. I'm the only guilty party. Nobody does this ever. But my phone was out. I looked at the phone. I scrolled through. It was a reel of Nate Diaz fight, and he's my favorite UFC fighter of all time, especially the fight between him and Conor, the first one, because I called it. I called my brother. I was like, I have a feeling that this is going to happen. And then he choked out Conor McGregor. I didn't bet on it, which I should have, because it was 10-1. I think it was more than 10-1, but I'm always good for the bet after the fact. I got to see, as I scrolled through, I saw the Nate Diaz fight. I looked over. I checked TikTok real quick because I didn't want TikTok to get jealous that I was looking at Instagram. And I saw Kirk Cameron. I was like, man, that is a blast from the past. And then here comes a reel that says, if you don't get 10 million views, then you don't pay and we'll make you viral. And then I scroll through that, and then I see Juvenile, and he's talking about, a quote that he said that was just off the top of his head. And after I realized, watching Juvenile, I had realized that I had wasted probably 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was. And the scroll was real in my life. And what happened was I got distracted. And these distractions are something that are scattered throughout our whole entire day. And this part leads me to the next one. That is, although when we focus on the one thing that can help us, it could keep us safe. I guess that depends on what you're actually focused on. And as I sat down with Proverbs 28 today, it was very simple. It cut through the noise of all the distractions to tell us first where to focus, alerts us of the signs of the distractions, and then smacks us upside the head to tell us again where to focus. So why don't we get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
I don't think that I've ever done this before, but here's the disclaimer. If you're not a business owner, a high-level executive in your company, or you don't have customers, this episode will not be for you. And when I say that, as I was looking at these things, the distractions are so real within our life, right? And I had a woman come in yesterday. Her name is Nancy Lee, and she is incredible. And we got a chance to be able to sit down, and I just asked her a couple of questions. She's in the consulting business. She's high level. She's the best at what she does, and she consults on leadership. And so as we started to talk, I just asked her some questions. I said, what are the pillars of your consulting? Because she's going into her own business, and she's going to, the businesses that get a chance to be able to work with her are going to be absolutely, they're going to be so fortunate. And as she goes along, I just asked, kind of what are the pillars? And she began to let me know. First of all, she wants to know about their communication, right? Their communication, how they communicate, what type, how often do they communicate? What type of language do they speak in? Not as far as Spanish or English, but what type of vernacular, what type of cadence do they have? And what is the repetition of that? She then asked me, or I asked her, what is another thing? And she said, I like to know where the power is, who's in control, who's in leadership, right? And she said that she likes to know the obvious ones, the not so obvious, and then the hidden power within the company. And I was like, well, tell me more about this. And as she was telling me, she was talking about the hidden powers, meaning that there's people in the organization that actually can move things a lot quicker, or sometimes at a higher rate than the person with the position. And so she wants to be able to identify those things. And then she said after that, after she figures out, where that power structure is or how that leadership structure is, she didn't use the word power, and I know it's a bad word, but we wanted to, for lack of a better word, we wanted to understand this. And then she said, okay, and then I want to be able to figure out what tools that they have. Right. So this was a pretty simple way to be able to go in and assess a company or an organization, to be able to look at and say, okay, what is the communication that you have? How often is it? What type of vernacular do you use? What type of language do you use? What's the frequency of that? Tell me about the organization, as far as the leadership organization. To tell me the obvious ones, the unobvious ones, and then the hidden ones. The hidden power within. Is it the person that, sometimes can thwart a brand new idea or a great idea because they have the power of the people? And then she asked about the tools. And as I began to ask these questions, she began to zero in on it. And then I asked her the question. I said, in 5 to 7 years, what do you want your company to look like? And she said, well, I'd like to have 15 to 20 people in the company. And I said, well, okay, let's stop for 1 second and look at this. If you say 15 to 20, it doesn't sound like that much of a difference between the two. But if we multiply that by 5, meaning that 20 by 5 equals 100, so that would be 100%. If you look at 15 times 5, it's 75. 5 times 20 is 100. So that's the difference between a C and an A. And a lot of times what we do is we have the tendency to look at and say, oh, well, I want between 15 and 20. Well, let's zero in on that. And as we began to go in, she was like, well, now you got me thinking about it. And there's a little bit more of a focus. And I said, well, once we get focused, then we can take and we could deliver your situation a lot different, because in 7 years, if you prepare now for what you want in 7 years, your company is going to look a lot different. And she said, well, how so? And I said, well, one of the things is if you have meetings, right? And so if you say in 7 years, I want to have, let's call it 15 people. And in your meeting today, you bring on yourself, you have yourself, and then you have one person. And you do a meeting and you guys each take 5 minutes, no big deal. It takes 10 minutes to be able to talk about the things that are on your heart or on your mind and where you want to focus. But I said, let's do the multiple on that. In the event that you have 15 people and they each take 5 minutes, it's 75 minutes. That's an hour and 15 minutes of just that, and you're not going to be able to get to your meeting. Well, if we drop that down to 5 minutes, now 15 times, or when we drop that down to a minute, that means that 15 minutes of the meeting is going to be based towards the desires of the person, them having their voice heard, all these things. And what can happen in this scenario is now you have 45 minutes of your hour meeting in 7 years to be able to do that. So when she looked at it, we began to talk about it. We began to break it down, and I gave her the example. I said, when we started our company, I only had 4 people within. And with those 4 people, we had meetings every single week. And a lot of them at first thought that I was absolutely crazy. And I actually put a time frame just because I had not put a time frame, and it lasted forever. So we wanted to have everyone's voice be heard. We wanted everyone to be able to speak in every single meeting. And at first I didn't put a time frame on it. And then the meeting got away from us. So we learned, we wrote it down, and it became a new procedure. So your procedures are nothing more than a list of your screw ups, right? So when we did this, we actually looked ahead and said, okay, well, we want to have, ultimately what we wanted to have was 100 locations. Now, we didn't get to that point, but that's where the desire was. So what we did is we actually took and said, okay, you have 15 seconds. You have 15 seconds to say who inspired you, why they inspired you, and then say if you did a RAC, which is a random act of kindness, and then give a local business focus that you're going to focus on and that you're going to patronize that business. And in 15 seconds, they had to be direct, the words had to be powerful, and they were able to go. Well, little did I know that a couple of years later, probably 5, 6 years later, we're going to have 85 people in our company. So if you do the math on 85 people, for every 4 people, that's a minute, 15 seconds apiece. Well, it took us just over 20 minutes to have every single person in an 85-person company to be able to have their voice heard. And this was over Zoom. Well, at first we were on, I think it was Skype, and then we went to Google Meet, and then we ended up on, I can't remember which one we did by the end. Maybe it was Google Meet that we did. But you see, what we did is we looked at it and we got really focused in, and that by us focusing, it stopped the distractions that were ultimately gonna happen. And the reason why I did this is because we did have a Christmas party one time, and if you were in our company, you understand that you remember this time. It was probably about 45 people, I think it was. And we had each person stand up, and they were going to talk about, like at the Christmas party, who inspired them, and kind of a high point of the year. Well, the first person went for a minute, second person went for a minute and a half. You can imagine how this goes. And on down the line, this took just over 4.5 hours to be able to get through like 40 people. And because I didn't set the rules before and I wasn't focused before, what happened is when I popped the person about halfway through, because we were taking so long and people were getting to 15 minutes of them talking because they were one-upping the next or the previous one. By the time that I did that in the middle, that person got so emotional. The reason why they got emotional is because I didn't communicate it before I started. And so by communicating things before they start, it'll stop the emotion from happening, because it's not a situation of, it's not a personal thing. We're simply putting the system in play. That's unemotional. We're managing the system and we're loving the people right through it, but we're holding them accountable. And this is what I was talking about with Nancy yesterday with her company. And so it's amazing, because as I looked at it, the focus point will stop distractions. But in our lives, right, my distraction this morning started off with, who was it? Let me see here. It was Nate Diaz. Then it went to Kirk Cameron. Then it went to the 10 million views or you get your money back. And then it went to Juvenile. I mean, these things have nothing to do with my life, except Nate Diaz. He's amazing, and I want to have him on the podcast. Kirk Cameron, I think, would be interesting too. And Juvenile would probably be interesting. The 10 million view guy, I don't know that I want him on. But this distracted me from it because I didn't have something set in line that I was focused on. And so in Proverbs 28, it cuts through the noise and distractions to tell us first where to focus, right? Where to focus. Because some of us say, oh yeah, you just need to be focused, but then they never tell us what to be focused on. And the Proverbs 28 actually gives us that. And then it gives us the signs of a distraction coming. And then it smacks us upside the head. This is the way that God works with me, and he's worked with me for years on this, is he'll smack me upside the head. Like he'll love on me, he'll give me grace, but then he smack me upside the head and be like, boy, I told you. And I think that when I say, boy, I told you, it sounds like my pop. Like my pop would be that way, right? He would be loving, he would show me the way, and then I would mess up and I'd go down the wrong road and he'd smack me upside the head. He'd say, boy, you need to wake up. Like, wake up in this scenario, and that's okay, and get us back to focus. So in Proverbs 28, this one was so much fun to me, because as I was looking at it, I was like, man, I just went through this. This was the practical application of distraction. I went through these distractions. I looked at Nancy yesterday, and before I started asking her the questions, there was some distraction, but as she locked into it and she was like, look, I look at their communication, I look at the organizational chart, and then I look at their tools, and then we're going to make them very, very efficient based off those things, right? And I had to give her an example, because I said, when I work with a company, when I consult with a company, it's very simple. Number one, I assess their culture, or I actually have them assess their own culture, score it on a 1 to 10. Number two, I ask them to score their process and procedure or their systems. Are they effective? Are they efficient, right? Score it from 1 to 10. I ask them to score their productivity, their innovation, their ability to adapt immediately. And once they get that, and sometimes they get, high scores in it, then I ask, like, okay, so how do your people feel about it? Because that's ultimately the vibe of your company. Your culture doesn't matter. Your leadership doesn't matter. Your systems don't matter. Your productivity doesn't matter. Your innovation or your ability to adapt immediately. None of that matters if people don't feel good about it. And see, because the vibe is not the energy you bring into the room as a leader, but the way that people feel when you leave as a leader. So when I go in, that's a focal point, right? And it keeps us from getting distracted. Although in my own life, I have the tendency to get a little distracted. So let's go through these. Let's power through them, which is great. It's in verse 1 of Proverbs 28. True confidence comes from only one place, and that's trusting in God. Like, God just wants us to spend time with him, trust him. He built it all. He owns it all. He built you. I had a conversation with my daughter the other day. I said, is this a want or a desire? I said, do you know the difference? And she's like, yes. I said, what's the difference? She said, I don't know. And I said, well, the difference between a want and a desire is a desire God puts on your heart, and he'll be the author of it and the finisher of it. A want is based off of you generally not wanting to lose something, thinking that you're going to miss out on something. And in the event that you don't do it now, that you're going to miss out. And if you use that as a pattern, it's amazing what can happen. But true confidence only comes from one place, and that's truly trusting in God. And in verse 2, focus creates peace and order, right? Peace and order. Think about peace and order in your life. When you have order, you have peace. when things are in order, people talk about it all the time. Like, they show the little jar and the rocks, and then they put the sand in. If you put the sand in first, then you can't fit the rocks. But if you put the big rocks in first, then you put the sand in next, everything fits. It's because if you take care of the big things, you focus in on the things that are the most important, then all the rest will fill around that. That's a metaphor that a lot of speakers use, and I've seen before. In verse 3, distractions produce no harvest. And I put in parentheses, results. They don't produce any results. They get you hyped. They get you emotional. They make you feel a certain way. But if you look at it, distractions, like today when I was looking at, Nate Diaz's fight, I was looking at Kirk Cameron, I was looking at the 10 million views, or my money back, or I was looking at Juvenile. Honestly, that didn't produce anything in my life. Actually, the Nate Diaz gets me fired up because me and my brother are really tight, and we always think that it's us against the world, and that's the way we've been throughout our lives, and that's the way the Diaz brothers are too. So maybe that gave me a little bit of motivation. Diaz brothers, you hear me? I want you on the podcast. Verse 4, listening pays off, right? Listening, like when you sit in and you listen, but you got to figure out what you want to listen to, and we got to be focused in that listening. In verse 5, seeking God brings understanding. Understanding is probably one of the most important things that you'll have, but understanding comes after knowledge. Knowledge comes after wisdom, and wisdom only comes from the fear of God or spending time with him, right? Fear of God is just the respect of God, and only way that you can respect something is if you see its words, see its actions, and they're in line. That creates respect. In verse 6, 8, 10, 11, 12, and 18, and I find that this one is probably pretty important because it's mentioned in a bunch of different verses, doing the right thing comes from focus. But it's focusing on the right thing. And what is the right thing? Well, there's only one thing that God asks us to be able to focus on, is focus on him. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all else will be added on. All else. This is what my pops would say to me all the time. He'd say, boy, did that verse say everything but this? No, he said everything. All else will be added on, right? Doing the right thing comes from focus. In verse 7 and 9, applying instruction builds the muscle of discernment. Discernment is probably, that's what I'm going through right now. I've got some things on the docket and on the table, and I'm using discretion, meaning pumping the brakes. I'm looking for insight. I'm looking into it. I want to see it for what it actually is as opposed to what it is on the outside. And then I'm using discernment as far as, could this work? Yes. Is it for me? That's where I'm at. But see, here we go. This applying instruction builds the muscle of discernment. Discernment, before you get discernment, you have discretion. Before you have discretion, you have insight. Before you have insight, you have understanding. Before you have understanding, you have knowledge. Before that, you have wisdom, and wisdom comes from the fear of God, or the focus on God, because you got to spend time with him, right? But that muscle of discernment is probably one of the most important things that you'll have in business and relationships and all across the board. In verse 13 and 17, being honest about distractions will prove to be valuable. So when you do get distracted, be honest. This morning I got very distracted. I thought the Nate Diaz thing was really cool. Nate, I want you on the podcast. Let's get you on here. And But the distractions, you got to be honest with it. You got to call it for what it is, have a bunch of grace with yourself and learn the lesson and keep it moving. It's just that simple, right? So don't beat on yourself and think, I'm never going to have any distractions. I love the guys out there that are like, you know what? I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and I ice plunge and then I run 6,000 miles. And then by the time it's noon, I've done 17 days of work. Understandable, but most of us get a little distracted. And so be okay if you do get distracted, but then know how to be able to get yourself back on track. And back on track is just to be able to focus on the one who loves you the most, has the most grace for you, and wants the best for you, and is the author and finisher of all your desires, which is, you guessed it, God. Understand, let's see here. In verse 14, understanding who is in control is paramount. This is probably one of the most important things. When I was talking with Nancy, when she goes into a company and she's consulting with them, when she's consulted with some of the largest companies, she consulted with Viore. Viore is a $5.4 billion company. She consulted with them, with their leadership. And look at this, guys. Understanding who is in control is paramount. Not only the person in the position of control, but the person who has the hidden control. Understand and identify that in a company, right? That's paramount to be able to understand that. And you should understand that in a family. You should understand that in a relationship. You should understand that in your own business. Who is in control? Who is in control? And then what is their character? So watch this. Understanding who's in control is paramount. And then it follows up. This is great. In verse 15 and 16 is who is in control? And it's asking, list it out. Who's the person in the position of control? Who's the person in the hidden control? And then the person that honestly no one knows about, but is making the decisions kind of happen or moving the people. This is so paramount inside of a company. And then ask yourself, what is the character of those people, right? In verse 19 and 20, focus will create joy, peace, and contentment, not to mention a plentiful harvest. And imagine that, focus, right? But what do we focus on? If you're focused on the right thing, it'll bring peace, joy, contentment, and not to mention a plentiful harvest. Well, okay, so what's the right thing? You guessed it. We talked about it. Trusting in God and spending time with Him. I tell you, it sounds so easy. It's not easy. It's just simple. It's just simple. In verse 21, love people and be no respecter of persons. This was a thing that my mom said to me all the time. She said, be no respecter of persons. I didn't understand it at first, but what she was saying is, don't give somebody more credit because of a position that they have. Love people for who they are, not what they do. And this was huge for me. But look at this in verse 21, love people and be no respecter of persons. Make a ton of friends. Make a ton of friends. It doesn't matter who the person is. Make a friend out of them. I just had Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas on the show. I did the introduction of him, and I was talking about the fact that he was Jamie's husband, and we talked about his kids. We talked about those things, and he said, first and foremost, I'm Jimmy Gomez. Before I'm Taboo, I'm Jimmy Gomez. Before you are your position, you are who you were born to be. And when we treat people that way, I tell you, it gives us an unfair advantage as we move through. In verse 22 and 27, focus gives way to generosity. When you're focused on the right things, generosity is just something that pours out of you. I just talked to Gary Spellman the other day. I would talk about him all the time, but I tell you, one of the most generous guys that you'll ever meet, and his generosity, he's focused. And his generosity, he just told me about a young lady that they're taking care of with PLH that, she's got a pretty rough scenario, not living in a great place, has a young child, and she's in a Paul Mitchell school, and the Peace, Love, and Happiness organization just put her into a new apartment. We'll get her on her feet, and over the next year, get her to a point where she has a job and she could take care of her kid. That's what PLH does. And so I'm so proud to be a Hall of Fame member of the PLH, Peace, Love, and Happiness charity that is founded by John Paul and Gary Spellman. But that generosity is massive. In verse 23, speak truth in love, speak life and preserve it. Speak truth in love. We all don't have to be the Simon Cowells of the world. They're like, you know what? I got to give it to you like this and just be nasty to people. No, speak truth in love and speak life. Like, let people know how awesome they are, how incredible they are, and give them some encouragement, because that's the thing that most of us are lacking. And especially with younger kids, I see it all the time. And I could tell you this, I coach football, I coach basketball. I try and coach anything that I can, especially with my son. But I don't know that much about the sport, but I do know about people. And when you build people, the people will build the business, they'll build the team, they'll build whatever. But the people have to be built, and the way that they're built is through encouragement. And that's what my pops used to always say. And he was the greatest encourager of all time. Love you, Pop. In verse 24, character takes focus, distractions are plentiful. Character takes focus, distractions are plentiful. Sit in that for a second. To build a true character takes focus. Just like what I put a post up on LinkedIn this morning, and the post was about AEO as opposed to SEO. AEO is Advanced Engine Optimization, and SEO is Search Engine Optimization. Well, search engine optimization is Google and things like that. When people Google you, you want to have a high SEO rating, but that's going to fall by the wayside in the next 3 to 5 years. And AEO is going to be very important. SEO is still important right now, but it takes focus for you to be able to have someone Google you and it say what you want it to say, or the things that you're actually doing. And AEO is exactly the same. And because people are looking to ChatGPT more then they're looking to Google. They're starting to AI you. If they hear about your business, they go into ChatGPT and say, who is the pizza place on the corner? I did this morning, and I would invite you to do this, is go to ChatGPT right now and just say, who is, and then say your name. I did this morning, and it listed out the things, because that takes focus. Like, building that takes focus, and that's just online. I'm talking about character in life. This takes focus also. But the distractions are plentiful. There's so many places that will be able to distract you as you go. In verse 25, focusing on trusting in the right place, and you will prosper. I said focusing, it said focus. Focus on trusting in the right place. What's the right place? Just spend time with the one who created you. The one that you see as the most valuable. Focus on trusting in the right place, and you will prosper. In verse 26, trust in yourself is foolish and the ultimate distraction. I didn't put the two in there. To trust in yourself is foolish and the ultimate distraction. And this is what God was saying, is like, if you want to think that it's about you, you want to think that you're the only one, you want to think that you have all the answers, that is the biggest distraction of them all. But to realize that when you put yourself around wise counsel, when you put yourself around people, I have a men's group at 7:30 to 8:30 here in Carlsbad, and I put myself around wise people. I want to do that. I want to reach out to friends of mine that are wise. And when I do that, it's amazing how they're able to lift up, but they're always, I'm always checking it against wisdom. So if they give me advice, my buddy David Hamilton, absolutely tremendous guy. When I need some insight, I run something by him. I call my buddy Nick Horgan with his company Amaze. When I call Nick Horgan, probably one of the most, the person who's blowing up on LinkedIn, not because he's an influencer, but because he's focused. But when I ask Nick, I'll call him and I say, I got 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I got one question. Can I call you? Yes. I call him and I get wise counsel. There's no fluff to it. It's wise counsel. But to trust in yourself is foolish and is the ultimate distraction. As we finish up today, and I know we went long, and I appreciate you for staying with me, is verse 28. When you trust in the Lord, you will outlast them. When the person that trusts in themselves and then you trust in God, I tell you, you're serving something that can't be defeated, is undefeated. And some people are like, well, what did, you say that about God? I'm saying, like, whatever your God is, but test it. Like I would test that. If your God is money, watch this. When you trust in your money, you will outlast them. Ask yourself, is that a true statement? I could tell you if you trust in money, it's not going to be. If you trust in yourself, just yourself, that's going to be a challenge too, because there's wiser counsel out there for you. And that wisdom starts with the fear of God. And think of that circle. We have the circle in the Vibe Within in the journal, the inch stones, right? And the circle goes fear of God, which is the respect of God. That brings wisdom. Wisdom is the right use of knowledge. So it brings knowledge, then it brings understanding, then it brings insight, then it brings discretion, then it brings discernment, discipline, strength, and it leads you back to the fear of God. When you trust in the Lord, and I'll just add to that, with all your heart, you will outlast them. Some people will jump out ahead of you. Maybe they'll go a little bit faster, but I guarantee you, and I've seen this time and time again, when you're working with somebody who is advantage, it's amazing. So as we finish today, we will never.
I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised.